Welcome back to another video, and today we're gonna spawn apples in the tree, and once we run into the tree the apples are gonna fall from it. So in this project I have just a regular red material, nothing about it really, and I have the three assets over here. So first let's go ahead, let's create a new blueprint actor, and this is gonna be apple. Let's open this up, and all we're going to do to this is we're going to add a sphere. We're going to make this sphere have our red material, this guy right here, and I'm going to scale this down to 0.25 so it is a lot smaller. And that's it. This could be your pickup or whatever other type of item that you want to basically pick up. So these are going to be the apples that are going to fall from the tree, and then you can do whatever you want with them. If you have my inventory system or at least similar to it, use the pickup master for this. Okay, the next thing we need is the tree itself. So I'm going to create a new blueprint class actor, and I'm going to call this bp_tree. Let's open this up. Let's add a static mesh, and the static mesh is going to be our tree, this guy right here. And then also I'm going to add another static mesh, which is going to be our leaves, like this. Now by default it's going to be too big, so I'm going to actually parent this like so, and I'm going to scale down the parent to like 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So it is smaller in my situation, but you have to create this whatever scaling it fits for your project. I know this isn't an apple tree, but well, I'm going to use whatever tree basically for this. Okay, so we have our tree ready. The next thing that we need is we need the placeholders, so basically where the apples are actually going to spawn. So I'm going to add arrow components for this. I'm going to add an arrow component. I'm going to move it up to one of the branches basically. So let's say we're going to move this to this branch right here. Then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, make another one. So somewhere roughly over here, like this. And I'm going to add a couple more. Now you can add as many as you like. I'm gonna have 6 on mine. Now what I'm also gonna do is I'm gonna rename this to arrow 0. Doesn't really matter, but at least the indexes are gonna match up with the array. Okay, but that's really not important. Now let's go inside of our event graph. And actually before we do that, I might want to grab my leaves and actually disable their collision so that the components that we're going to add, and so when the apples are going to fall, so that they wouldn't collide with the tree. So I'm going to actually grab the leaves and I'm going to go no collision on this one. Okay, so far so good. Let's go to the event graph and let's start making the code. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to grab all the locations where I have my arrows. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to get components by class, get components multiples, and then for the class I'm going to use the arrow class. If you use other components, use that class. I have arrow components, and then I'm going to make this into a variable, and I'm going to call this apple locations and set this on a begin play. Now, the next thing that I want is also I need some kind of identification whether there is an apple in that location already. So for that, I'm going to make a new variable, and I'm going to call this apple spawned. This is going to be a boolean, and this is going to be an array. And I'm going to make sure that my apple spawned array is the same as the apple's location. So I'm going to grab the apple spawned, and I'm going to do resize like this. Now to resize this to the correct size from the apple locations, I'm gonna get the length and I'm gonna connect it like so. Okay, so far so good. The next thing that we need is we need some kind of a timer that is actually going to respawn our apples or spawn them in the first place. So I'm gonna make a custom event and I'm gonna call this spawn apples. And then from here, let's grab our apple spawned. We're going to do a loop for each, And over here, we're going to do an if branch check to see if there is an apple in that location already. If it's true, if there is an apple, we're simply going to ignore this. But if it's false, that means, well, the location is empty. So therefore, we can actually go ahead and spawn an apple. Now, I don't want them to be spawned always. I don't want all the apples to be spawned at the same time. So I'm going to do an if. And I'm going to do just a randomizer. So basically, I'm going to do random float in range. And I'm going to do 0 till 100. And I'm going to check if the return value is bigger or equal than, let's say, 50. So I'm going to have like a 50-50 chance for the apple to be spawned. Like so. Okay. Now, the next thing from the true route. So if it's true, that means we're going to spawn the apple. So we could do add static mesh component. And before we actually do that, before we create the visual representation of the apple, I also want to make sure that I have said that the apple has been spawned in that location. So I'm going to grab the apple spawned, and I'm going to set array element. So I'm going to basically set one of the booleans to be true, so that it would tell the system, at least, well, in this case, this loop and this condition, that, well, there is already an apple, don't spawn anymore. So for the index, we want to grab the index from the array. And for the item, we're going to check this to be true since, well, apple has been spawned. And then we're going to proceed with actually spawning the apple. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click the relative transform to split it. And I'm going to go ahead and select a mesh. In this case, it was just a regular sphere in my case. That's going to be a visual representation of the apple. If you have an apple mesh, use that one. We're going to use a red color for this. And I will scale this down. So relative scale is going to be 0.25, 0.25, 0.25, so that it matches up with the apple actor itself. Otherwise, it's going to be very big in the tree. And the next thing we want to do is from the return value, we want to attach component to another component. Now, what we want to do is we want to attach this sphere to the arrow location, so basically where the apples should be at. And to do so, we can grab our apple locations, we can get a copy from the array, and use that as the parent. Now for the index, again, we want to grab the index from the loop. So from our spawned, apple spawned array, like this. Now one more thing that we want to do is we want to grab our attach node. So this guy right here, and we want to change the location rule to snap to target and the rotation as well, so that it would go to that specific location. Otherwise, well, it's going to stay here and it's going to be always relative to the arrow component rather than actually being in the exact position as the arrow component. Now we want to go ahead and set a timer on this thing. So on the begin play, once we have resized our apple spawned, I'm going to go ahead and set timer by event. Then I'm going to connect my event. So spawn apples. Let's say timer will be 5 seconds and we're going to make this looping. Now for actual game, I would suggest maybe making this bigger, but so that we don't have to wait that long. We're going to only wait for 5 seconds for some apples to respawn. Now the next thing that we need is so that we can actually make the apples fall from the tree. Now to do so, we can do something called the hit event. So if we would grab the static mesh of our tree, since this guy has a collision, we could actually scroll down and make a on component hit. So whenever we will run into the tree, it is going to spawn, drop the apples from the tree. But we got to make sure that this static mesh component actually has in the collision rules, has the simulate generate hit events. We need to generate hit events, otherwise this isn't going to work. So now that it does generate the hit events, we can actually launch our code. Now just to make sure that it is actually us that run into the tree, not some other random actor, for the tutorial I'm just going to cast to the third person character, but while using blueprint interfaces would be a little bit of a better idea. Okay, we know that this is a character, then at this point if it returns true here, then what we can do is we can grab our apple spawned. We can do a loop for each to check which apples actually have been spawned, like this. From here, let's do an if to check if apple has been spawned, and if it has, if it's true, then we're going to do exactly the opposite of what we did over here. So we're going to grab our apple spawned and we're going to set array element from the true to be false. for the index, we're going to use the arrays index, like so. So now we're going to reset this back to false, and the system is going to be able to respawn an apple back in that specific location. Okay. The next thing is to actually spawn actor from class so that the apple would actually fall from the tree. So we can go ahead, grab our apple actor or the pickup master, split the transform, and now we need to provide a spawn location. Now for the spawn location, we can grab our apple locations, we can get a copy, and then we can use an array index from the loop. And then from this location, we can get world location. And this is going to return us the location of that apple in the tree. So then it's going to spawn the apple actor, and the apple is going to fall from the tree. And the last thing left for us to do is actually to destroy the apple that has been left in the tree. So the static mesh component that we created previously. And we can do that by, if we grab the arrow location, from this arrow component, we can get child component. I know that I'm going to have only one because there is only one per arrow, so I can use this. Otherwise, you could use also the get child components and then loop through them and destroy all of those. But I know I only will have one component, so I'm going to use the child index 0, and then I can go ahead and drag from this and destroy the component. As simple as that. One last thing that I forgot to do was actually to simulate the physics on the apple itself, the apple actor that we're using over here. Otherwise, it is not going to fall. So let's select our sphere, scroll down until we find the physics, and simulate physics. Compile and save this. Hit play. Let's wait for 5 seconds. So 1, 2, and there we go. We have an apple over there, an apple over there, a bunch of apples, another one just spawned. So if we run into the tree now, we can see the apples have fallen from the tree. There we go. And that's about it. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, like, all that good stuff, and I see you in the next one.